And welcome to the Friday show, presented by Woodbine. I'm Ray Paulick, joined by Bloodstock editor Joe Nevills. Joe, what is happening at Woodbine Mohawk this weekend?
Well. A week before the Breeders' Cup, we'll have the Breeders' Crown at Woodbine Standardbred, harness racing's most prestigious year-end divisional championship series. $6.7 million worth in purses, over 12 championship races taking place October 28th and 29th. First post each night is at 7 p.m. Eastern.
All right, well, we are really pleased to be joined by Super Agent Ron Anderson, Jockey Agent to Hall of Famers Jerry Bailey, Gary Stevens, Garrett Gomez, Chris Antley, John Velazquez, when he's eligible, Joel Rosario, I'm sure. Ron, welcome to the Friday show, and thank you so much for taking some time. I know you're juggling a couple draws at different tracks today. So
just did Churchill opening day, and I'm waiting on Belmont for New York Bread Day, so that'll be like right as soon as we're done here.
Well, you're a busy guy, and I appreciate it. For the benefit of readers who don't really know what a jockey agent does, could you just briefly explain the role?
Jock's agent is the go-between person between the jockey, the trainer, or the owner. I deal with trainers mostly. I have, even this week, I had three owners call, and I can't stand that because they're talking about their kids, and everybody's kids are great, even if they're in jail. Even some of them are friendly or friends with me, and I say, look, I want the guy that's living with the horse call me and explain some good, bad, or indifferent about what we're talking about.
Yeah, so you've got two excellent riders in Johnny V, Hall of Famer, Joel Rosario, gonna get in the Hall of Fame eventually. How do you balance having two riders of that caliber? What's your process with that?
These guys are just such professionals. They're not whiners. They're not complainers. They understand. I got to keep it as two separate jobs. And it's great that you have me on here, and I hope some people are listening to this. This situation just happened. Joelle rides a filly in New York for John Terranova in the juvenile filly, a 2-year-old filly race. She runs second. We go to Keeneland. He rides one for Brad Cox that finishes second. Both graded stakes, both going to get in the Breeders' Cup. And I got a tough decision to make with Joel, which one is better, which one's the best opportunity for him. Excuse me.
Bless you.
So I thought Brad Cox had a race over the track, finished second, running on at the end. John and Tanya have been so great to me over the years, but I kind of thought Joel's situation was better with Brad Cox, so I pitched them Johnny. They've had nothing but luck with Johnny, Hall of Fame rider, world-class rider, big on these days. They went for Johnny. So I keep it as separate jobs. I don't need a whole lot of input from anybody, but then a situation like that comes up, like Malathot in the Ashland last year. Johnny couldn't be there that day. Joel filled in. It was a jump ball and who they wanted to use back. They opt for Johnny. He stayed with her. So, they make it easy. They're great riders. So I don't feel any pressure at any time with either one of them. They both win, and it's all good.
Yeah. So I think I've got the numbers here right. You have booked mounts for riders that have won 38 Breeders' Cup races. Is that right?
38 Breeders' Cups, and I think 16 Triple Crown minus 115. Johnny got the one obviously taken away with Medina Spirit, but 15 Triple Crown races. So, I've been lucky. I'm really good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm really lucky. I represented, Michael Jordan's basically. They're all since Fernando Toro and the first Breeders' Cup of Royal Heroine, through Gary Stevens, through Chris Antley, Garrett, you read the list. I'm fortunate enough to be representing the right people. So it's all about the jocks for me. And for all of us, it's all about the horses. The horses are the equalizer. They feed all of us. So that's,
So do you have any sort of insider tips? You're watching races, you're talking to trainers. Do you use the sheets or Thorograph or anything like that?
I use
decisions?
Ragusan for years. They're a tool, and I tell people that are trying to learn or trying to ask questions about sheet. They're a tool to how should I put? Tell you who can't win more than who can win for me. They're an elimination situation for me. Sometimes you can't see on a form. Like Julio Canani, one of my best friends from the West Coast from years ago. He worked backward, and he was a good handicapper. He worked backwards. He worked started with the ones that couldn't win, and when he narrowed it down to 2 or 3 or 4 that could win, then he'd make his play off of that. Sheets do the same thing for me. So they don't necessarily tell you the winner, but they do tell you the losers for sure.
So I know that you've had a lot of these Breeders' Cup mounts lined up for months at this point. You kind of know who are going to get a lot of these, but there are also a lot of riders who are going to be, double booked, not even necessarily your own, but, other riders out there. When something happens like that, how do you go about picking up additional mounts for your guys?
Well, I'm a big hands-on person, like a horse that we've ridden. We have some what I call hands-on feel for them. So I kind of base my decisions going towards these days. Is this one good enough that we've been riding, or is this not good enough? And if they're not good enough, then I kind of go looking for, is Louis Saez in trouble? Is Irad in trouble? Is Jose in trouble? And I pitch guys, here's another prime example. Wayne Catalano won the 2-year-old race on the turf here with a horse that Pratt rode. And I knew going in that Pratt had a confliction with Chad Brown, with one that he'd been riding in New York. So I pitched Wayne right away. I pitched Chad right away. And I'm not bragging, but they both told me the same thing. We don't have Pratt, we got you. That's what Chad said. Wayne said the same thing. We got you. So, and I try and stay ahead of that stuff. It's not hard to see. It's just due diligence and work. You guys work hard. Ray sends out a report every day. I have no idea how you guys can even piece that together, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of, experience and also that's just what we do or what I do. And lucky enough, when I pitch somebody like Chad or Wayne or Todd or Billy or somebody, they more often than not say yes. Warlike Goddess is another good story. I couldn't go on that day because Billy made his mind up. Sometimes he waits late to make his decisions. He picks a day where I can't get there for her. And I told him, I said, Billy, I have the Breeders' Cup held for you at this point, but I can't get there that day. And I wasn't sure whether I'd be back on her, but the owners and Bill decided to use Joel on her, even though I didn't win on her last time. But it's all about the product. It's all about, I'm working for two great guys, and getting on these horses, they make it easier than not. So
I know that there's probably some decisions that haven't been made yet, but how are you looking for this year's Breeders' Cup? I know some of your mounts, but who are some of your best mounts you think
we're in good shape? Trust me. But Brad Cox, we're gonna ride Chop Chop with Joel, and You're My Girl for Terranova in the distaff or the juvenile fillies. Wayne Catalano, Joel rides in the and the winner is in the 2-year-old colt race.
Yep.
Starting backwards, obviously Epicenter, if one of these two heavy heads should stub their toe, I think he'll come running. He's a very live horse. If John's horse can't quite get 1.25 miles or the race sets up where Irad and he hook up, maybe Epicenter comes running. I think he's an exceptional horse. I thought he'd win the Triple Crown. It didn't materialize, but he's trained on since then. Joel sat on him the other morning for the breeze. He was very impressed with him. Johnny's on Happy Saver. He would be just a horse. If he was to run third or fourth, would be doing well. Warlike Goddess, obviously, is one of the choices. The turf races anymore, guys. For me, it's the Europeans races to lose, and you start backwards. They point to these races anymore. You got, the Godolphin clan, and you've got Aidan O'Brien and Joseph O'Brien and all these guys. They just have really, really good horses. Now, Johnny's going to end up on a horse in the filly and mare called Above the Curve, I believe. She was just third in the Prix de l'Opry, which is, going back to Royal Heroine days, I know is a major
race.
Cup race. It's a huge race. The filly that runs last in there is very good. She was third, beaten 3/4 of a length. I think she's very, very sneaky in this spot. She won't be a huge secret, but very, very nice filly. They're waiting on William Buick, I believe, to make a decision, but it sounds like he's going to ride Tuesday. So this leaves this one open for Johnny. Malathot, obviously, Clairiere and the Distaff, both with a chance. Clariere's trained on. Malathot is obviously, probably the favorite of the second choice. In Italia, Joelle rides in the filly race. She will be in front. It's Chad. She's won her last two races very impressively. Hopefully,
you really are low.
No, I'm not.
How are you looking in the 2-year-old Colts race?
I'm gonna ride the one I was second on in New York for Brad Cox. His name is Verifying. The horse, he broke his mane at Saratoga. Very impressive. I think he's a horse maybe that doesn't win this race, but I think going forward he's one of the players for next year. A little too early to completely tell, but I think he's something with a huge upside. Johnny's on a very interesting filly called Carol Concerts that was actually in trouble in the race at Woodbine and finished second, I believe. A guy named Nathan Squires is a trainer. Impressed with him on the phone. He seems very pumped about all this, and she could be interesting too. National Treasure is another one that Johnny rides. This is another one of Bob Baffert's quality road colt. Broke his mane the first time, was second to Bob's favorite in the Breeders' Cup. This horse has a huge upside. I think going forward, he's definitely a huge Derby consideration already.
So you've been doing this for, upwards of 5 decades at this point. You've gone from teletype machines to faxes to cell phones. What do you see are the biggest changes in your profession from when you started to where we are today?
Well, the biggest change in our profession is guys used to have limited number of stalls and horses. And now the big guys got bigger and the little guys got squeezed out. And I'm not necessarily sure that that's great for our business. But at this point in time, if you're asking for what's changed the industry, that's changed it big time because, guys have huge numbers of horses and it's not easy to keep everybody else going. But phones, when I first started out, we didn't have phones. We ended up with pagers, and then you'd have to get to a pay phone. And when Gary Stevens hired me, I got an obscure number on my pager, and I drove home for 30 minutes before I called him back. Said, "I want you to come over. We need to sit down and talk." So that's changed things. Fax machines, emails. I got some great stories. We got a night in the mirror story about, I want to think it was the third, maybe our World Cup. Singspiel, Gary had ridden in the Rothmans. He ran off with them for 1.25 miles. Michael Stout's office calls me. Gary's going through all kinds of trials and tribulations with his knees, his home life. He's got a bunch of business. I call Michael's office back, and I tell Michael Gary can't get there for Singspiel. He wins. But if I'd have just had a cell phone or anything, I could have called Michael and say, by the way, turf, now it's dirt. What do you think? He'd have said, look, he trained great. I'd have been there in 5 seconds, right? So lots of changes in the world, especially in our lives. So that's just a couple of stories about things that have progressed.
Ron, do you have a lot of interaction with the jockeys going over race strategies or specific horses and that sort of thing?
Not so much. Johnny, I don't have to say hardly anything to. Joel, at times I'll say, my observation is the outside's better than the inside, or, especially when it's rained and stuff. He sees it too, but every once in a while I'll say, I think the inside's not great, or, the turf course looks like the inside's not great. Maybe a few pass off the fence the last quarter of a mile. Okay. But I don't say, you don't want to give them too much to think about, because they can leave the gate and everything can change. Somebody stumbles, they stumble, they end up, a guy sends inside of them, a guy sends out. You don't want to tie their hands, because the good ones they're instinctual. They can't tell you what they're doing. They just react, they respond. And that's kind of the way it is. So I don't get involved with a whole lot of that.
You can't ride the favorite in every race, but, do you find it important to take him out on a long shot, or get your guy him out on a long shot in the hopes that you might wind up with that sort of Arcong-like performance? Or, what is it important to get your guy in the race, even if they don't necessarily have much of a chance on the horse?
It depends on is it Billy Mott? Is it Chad Brown? Is it Todd Fletcher? Is it, hold on 2 seconds. Is it somebody that has a chance, or is it some obscure guy that's just, trying to swing for the fence?
Right.
It depends on the circumstance. It depends on. I've had guys call me up and say, "Hey, look, this horse is going to be 20-1, and there's a story, this long about it, this or that, or." Lost a shoe, or this. You got to be a good listener, and I consider myself a very good listener. So there's all different, and I tell other people, you got to know the personalities at time. Like, I'm liable to say to you, Joe, one thing. I'm liable to say to Ray the same exact thing, and you're liable to be okay with it, and Ray's liable to be fighting mad at me. So you kind of need to know the personalities too, on what you can do, what you can't do, what you can say, what you can't do, when you can say it, when you can't say it, when you tell somebody no, when you can't tell somebody no. And there's no blueprint for any of this. It's kind of trial and error. I can't teach either one of you to be a jocks agent. You kind of just need to jump on the water and swim. That's kind of all there is to it.
Well, one last quick question. Where can we see Joel and Johnny riding this coming winter? I know John was here before.
So far, Johnny's going to Del Mar right after Breeders' Cup here. Okay. Baffert's requested him to come out. I'm on the fence with Joel, and I can't tell you yet. He could be, I don't know. He could be California. He could be at Oakland. He could be in Florida, and I don't know yet. So we'll figure it out right after Breeders' Cup, I hope.
Well, hey, we appreciate you taking the time. I was kind of hoping you would take that call so we could actually see you in action doing your job while we're recording.
It's actually a friend.
But Ron, thanks so much for helping explain your job. Best of luck with the Breeders' Cup, an event that you've had tremendous success with in the past. We thank you very much for joining us.
Anytime, guys. Thank you for having me.
Support award-winning independent horse industry journalism and become a Paulick Report Insider on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, insiders get access to exclusive Q&As with Paulick Report staff, insight behind our editorial process, exclusive opinions and on-site analysis, Paulick Report merch, and more. This is not a paywall. The website you know and love will always be the same. But if you want more, and you want to make our coverage even better, visit patreon.com/Paulick Report and become a Paulick Report Insider today.